Lesson 30 picks up with Camp David, one of the perks of being president. It's your vacation retreat. Many times presidents go to Camp David on the weekends just to get out of Washington. President Trump met with his cabinet at Camp David. President Trump usually doesn't go to Camp David. He goes to one of his properties. He owns many properties and golf courses, and he likes to get out of Washington and go to one of his properties to play golf and kind of get away from Washington, D.C. He doesn't use Camp David much to this point. He did have a meeting with his cabinet at Camp David. To President Trump's right, which is our left, is Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. And sitting on President Trump's left, which is our right, is the Secretary of Defense, James Mattis. James Mattis. So those are very important foreign policy members of his cabinet, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and James Mattis, the Secretary of Defense. Air Force One is how presidents fly around the country and go to foreign countries. Inside Air Force One, this is George H.W. Bush, the 41st President of the United States, working in his office inside Air Force One. The 42nd President of the United States, Bill Clinton, in his office inside Air Force One. Okay, presidential succession. The vice president is elected with the president on the ticket with the president, has the same qualifications, 35 years of age minimum, native-born American citizen, and a resident of the United States for at least 14 years. We know that the only constitutional responsibility of the vice president is to preside over the Senate. The vice president can vote in case of a tie. If there's a 50-50 vote in the Senate, the vice president, as president of the Senate, can vote, but he rarely attends. We know that. The Senate pro tempore, or the pro tem, presides in lieu of the vice president's absence. The vice president becomes president if the president dies, is removed from office, becomes seriously ill, or resigns. Current vice president is Mike Pence, former congressman and former governor from the state of Indiana, was elected with Donald J. Trump, Republican, on that ticket. The 25th Amendment is the amendment that explains the process through which the vice president becomes president. The vice president, after becoming president, chooses another vice president with the approval of Congress. I want to stress that the Speaker of the House, who is third in line to be president, does not move up to the vice president's position if a vice president becomes president. No, the vice president chooses his own vice president after becoming president, and then the Congress approves of that selection. If the 25th Amendment also states if the president is temporarily disabled, the vice president will act as president until the president is able to go back to work. For example, President Bush had a colonoscopy while in office, and before he had that procedure, the colonoscopy, which is a common procedure, they had to submit a letter to the Speaker of the House and the Senate pro tem that while he was under anesthesia, I don't know if I'm saying that right, while he was under, Vice President Cheney was the acting president for like 4 or 5 hours until after the procedure and after President Bush had come out of the procedure and recovered from being put under. So there is a very strict procedure that must be followed when the president is temporarily disabled. Now, the president can also be removed from office through the 25th Amendment. You may have been hearing about this in the news and on social media. Many opponents of President Trump have talked about trying to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president. Now, what is that? It's Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, Section 4, that makes provisions to remove a president if the president is not fit or unable to carry out his duties as president. Now, the way it works is the vice president, along with a majority of the cabinet secretaries, that would be 8 out of 15 to be a majority. There's 15 cabinet secretaries, so 8 of them, along with the vice president, would have to agree that the president is unable or unfit to carry out his duties. They submit a letter to the Speaker of the House and the Senate pro tem. If the president disagrees, he submits his own letter to the Speaker of the House and the pro tem that he is fit to serve. So now Congress has to resolve this issue. They have 21 days, according to the amendment, to resolve the issue, and a 2/3 vote in both houses would be needed to remove the president from office in case he was unable or unfit to carry out the duties as president. A 2/3 vote, so not a simple majority, a 2/3 vote would be needed to remove the president. The Presidential Succession Act establishes the line of succession if both the president and vice president die or leave office at the same time, kind of simultaneously. We know that the speaker is third in line or first after the president and vice president. And then if something were to happen to the speaker as well, then the president pro tempore would become president. If something were to happen to him at the same time, again, this would be a catastrophe if the president, the vice president, the speaker, and the pro tempore were all killed simultaneously. Then the order would be in the cabinet order in which they were created. So the Secretary of State was the first cabinet position created by George Washington. Then Treasury, Defense, Attorney General. Those are the first 4 cabinet positions under George Washington. So that would be the order of succession if something just catastrophic were to happen. Here are the 15 cabinet positions in the order in which they were created. I'm not going to go through each of these 15 cabinet positions now. That will be the topic of a later lesson. But again, this would happen in one of these crazy scenarios that is not going to happen in real life. And that actually ends lesson 30, kind of wrapping it up with the president and the vice president. We'll get into the duties of the president and vice president in our next lesson.